myself. So my name is Marie Wallace. I'm an analytics strategist with IBM. And the specific area of analytics that I look at is the whole area of unstructured analytics. I started doing some of the analytics which is now underpinning the likes of IBM Watson. So I've looked at content. How do you analyze content? But recently I've been interested in people. It's a lot more interesting than content, I can assure you. So all the work I've been doing over the last few years has been about analyzing people, particularly people networks, and trying to understand what that means. So today I'm going to talk to you about, when we get the slides up, I'm going to talk to you about a project that I've been doing within IBM that's analyzing people networks, but specifically I want to share the privacy implications and talk to you about the journey that we've been on, what's worked for us, what hasn't worked for us, and hopefully after the talk I can get some of your feedback on whether you think that approach might work for you guys as well. Okay, let's get started. Nowadays, big data and big data analytics is frequently presented as being the villain of the piece, where data scientists are often considered as being responsible for either exploiting individuals for the benefit of corporations, or at worst, dehumanizing society by treating people as nothing more than bits and bytes. I'm a data scientist, and I'm also a humanist, and I don't believe that the situation is that black and white. I firmly believe that analytics and big data has the potential to transform our lives for the better. By collecting personal information, it can help cure disease, address traffic congestion, greenhouse gas emissions, and it can also help connect people personally and professionally. However, big data does also have a dark side. And if we want it to really benefit society and benefit all of us, we need to take on this challenge thoughtfully, cautiously, and keep people at the center, the needs of the individual at the center all the time. Now, this is very easy to say, but it's not that easy to do. Because I personally believe in the democratization of analytics. I believe that every individual should have access to analytics that can help them, that can transform their lives, that can make their lives better. It's not just about companies. But if we want to give everybody access to analytics, we have this really delicate balance that we need to take from providing insights to respecting privacy. And we also have to help people understand the value of analytics. So it's this journey that I want to share with you today, as over the last several years, I've worked on these types of people analytics solutions, and I've worked and struggled with the privacy implications. And hopefully we've come up with a solution that at least works within the enterprise, and that's what I'd like to share with you today. So the evolution of privacy. Social, mobile, and cloud technologies are connecting us like never before. And if we want to really benefit from being part of these new global human networks, we need to accept, and this is hard for some people, to accept that our data is out there and it's out of our immediate control. Now, the reaction of many governments is to say we simply turn off the data tap, either by preventing data from being collected or by wrapping it in really complicated regulatory frameworks. Now, there's a problem with this. Firstly is, I don't think it's in society's interest to turn off big data. And secondly, even if we wanted to turn it off, I don't believe it's possible to turn it off. And the reason for that is multifold. First of all, in this new interconnected world, data leaks between people, so that the data somebody else shares can be used to generate an insight about you. So, for example, I had a lovely dinner last night with the organizers of the event, and afterwards I didn't, but I could have easily gone up onto Facebook and, talked about the dinner, let people know that I've had a dinner, who was at the dinner, what we ate. That would have been a very natural social thing to do. So now that data has been shared with Facebook. That data talks about a number of people. It's my data, but it's referring to them. So if I then give Facebook permission to analyze that data, does that mean that they can derive an insight about somebody else based on my data? So this notion of data ownership is utterly meaningless in an interconnected world. The other challenge is this notion of private data versus public data. With analytics, you can take private data that looks harmless on the surface, and you can derive a very private insight from it. Similarly, you can take private data to derive a public insight. So the definition of privacy itself is questionable. I'll give you an example. So you might, for example, analytics might analyze public social channels. And from that, it can look at patterns of behavior, and it might predict where your physical location is, or it might even predict a potential health risk. So that's now a very, very private insight that's been derived from some public data. On the other hand, it can take private data like your GPS location and use that to build a traffic model, a traffic prediction model, to help with traffic congestion and to get people into work in the morning. In that case, that's a public service, public insight that's been generated that doesn't connect back to the individual at all. There's no personally identifiable data that's been shared. So I think what we're faced with at the moment, and actually I'm going to mention a third thing, because at dinner yesterday, one of the gentlemen, whose name escapes me, so I'm sorry if you're here in the room, he mentioned also, which is really key, is how the data is used. So this is another aspect as well, is you might have public data like, I had a Thai meal yesterday and I loved it, so I like Thai food. And that might be used by a company I don't know, maybe they decide that Thai food is bad for heart disease and I don't get insurance because of my eating of Thai food. That's a bit of a ridiculous example. But the point is, people can use public data to make a decision about you which is quite private, it's quite personal. So like, for example, insurance. So with all these types of dimensions sitting on top of data, we really are faced with privacy spaghetti. So what do we do in this scenario where it's not about the data anymore, it's about the insights that are derived from the data and how those insights are used. There is no easy solution, and I'm not going to pretend that there is, and I'm not going to pretend that I have all the answers. But I do believe I have an answer. And this is an answer that's worked for us really well in the enterprise, and I believe could also work externally. And that's this idea of transparency. Now, what do I mean by transparency? Just imagine a future, and we're not that far away from it today, and I don't mean to pick on Facebook, but it is the biggest social network on the planet, so I'm going to use another Facebook example. So just imagine a world where every piece of information that you see is filtered by an algorithm. In fact, we're not that far away. Today, when you look at your Facebook newsfeed, it's basically filtered based on the Facebook EdgeRank algorithm. When you do a Google search, the search results are filtered based on the Google PageRank algorithm. So at the end of the day, you're getting the data that the algorithm wants you to get. Now, we're assuming that it's got our best interest at heart. That's a really big assumption, because in the future you can imagine a situation where maybe the social network wants to increase revenue of cars. So it analyzes the social stream and it picks the gentleman in the room who kind of maybe might need a car. They haven't had a car in a while. And it starts to feed them subliminal messaging. It starts to feed them articles to generate a need for a car. So before they know it, they've ended up buying a car that they couldn't afford and they didn't need because they were manipulated by the algorithm. This is not a million miles away from where we are. So what I mean by transparency is that just imagine instead if every company had to share with us the insights that they were using every time they engage with us. And by engage, I mean it might be engaging by, they've shown us an ad, we're interacting with their social stream, we're at a cash register, but if they at least had to share with us the insights, irrespective of where they came from. They might, for example, have decided, somebody likes Thai food, and they got that from social, and it wasn't even my data that generated that. So they have to share that information with us. Now imagine the change that would invoke. You can't manipulate somebody, or it's difficult, if you tell them in advance that you're manipulating them. So this is kind of what we're trying to do. We're trying to look at this idea of transparency, of ensuring that the companies share the data that they're deriving with us. And this is also important because as big data analytics get smarter, as more data is collected, companies may know more about us than we know about ourselves. It's a strange and kind of eerie idea, but it's the reality. So we want to make sure that they share that data with us. There's no secrets, it's not hidden, it's all shared with us. And this is exactly what we've done in the enterprise. So I want to share with you, and this is really practical, I want to share with you exactly what we've done in IBM to deliver people analytics in a way that is sensitive to our employees in this example, and that uses this approach of radical transparency. So let's start. So IBM, we've been using social and collaboration technology long before there was such a thing as social media. So we have probably one of the largest and the longest standing enterprise social networks on the planet. We have a lot of employees, and they're all looking to maximize the value that they get from their social and collaboration investment. On the other hand, we have a company, the business, who wants to understand how employees interact with each other. They want to understand what that says about their business. So they want to analyze the employees. So these are these two different sides of it. Now, when asked to build this system, the first thing, obviously, that came to mind is people are suspicious of analytics. Nobody likes to feel that they're being analyzed. So what we had to do is we had to figure out how could we make analytics something that the employees wanted us to do? How could we make it safe for them, and how could we deliver value to them? And I have to confess, I have to thank Germany and Austria and Switzerland for this, because we spent a lot of time talking with the people that work with various work councils, and they really helped push us to not look at privacy as a barrier to innovation, but as an opportunity to innovate. And I think we've come up with an interesting model that works really, really well with the enterprise, and I'd like to share that with you now. So what we decided is, coming back to the democratization of analytics, we needed every employee to want to be analyzed. That's the first thing, because that's where it all comes from. So what we did is we were very transparent. We created an open, transparent project where we decided we were going to build a solution for IBMers, by IBMers, to help IBMers by giving them actionable insight. So we created a community and we started the open dialogue, and we basically got essentially a crowdsourced agreement on what was the privacy model, what was the approach that we were going to take. And it had three key principles. One was privacy, was the whole area of privacy and transparency, where we would commit to our users, to our employees, that every piece of analytics we did, we would share with them. They would get to see everything that we analyzed, every insight that we found. They would get to see it. The other thing we promised them is that we wouldn't share it with anybody else. They would get to see their insights, and it wouldn't be shared with anybody, with their manager, with the CEO, nobody would see their analysis except for them. The second thing we promised them is simplicity and ease of use, that the analytics would be simple, easy for them to understand. We wouldn't be hiding or obfuscating anything. And the third thing was personal empowerment. We would give them analytics that would empower them to do something, would help them either in their career, getting their job done. So it would be really worth it. For them to let us analyze them, it would be worth it. The other thing, one key thing, reason that we had, when we did this, and the reason we did the crowdsourcing, is the other thing is privacy is something different to everybody. Some people really didn't want to share their analysis. Some people wanted to share their analysis. So by having it that the user could choose, it was a choice. That way we could get everybody to live together, and the people that chose to share could share, the people that chose not to share didn't have to share. So this is the employee-centric approach that I mentioned. And I actually skip forward a slide because I already spoke about that. But so this idea of having the employee at the center of every decision that we made. So at the end of the day, what it meant is we had this system where we collected all the social and collaboration data. We did lots and lots of analysis, and I'll show you the analysis in a minute. The only person who saw the analysis was the individual, so they felt safe and secure, and they got something they were interested in. They wanted us to do more analysis. And the business got aggregated, de-identified analysis. So the business got value as well. They got to see how their organization interacted. They got to see which teams were isolated, which teams were collaborating. They got to see what the level of expertise was within their different organizations. They just couldn't pin it down to an individual name unless the individual chose to share that information. Now, initially when we proposed this, employees liked the idea, naturally, because it's all about them. The management thought we were a bit nuts, because why do all this work? Why build this big data analytics system when we're not going to get much of the value? So it was a bit of a journey that we also took with ourselves inside IBM. But the benefits have been significant. And there's three key benefits I wanted to point out. Earlier I mentioned trust. This idea, people don't want to be analyzed. They're not sure what's going to happen with the insights, how it's going to be used. So they were initially really, really nervous. And so many meetings I went into where IBMs were talking about Big Brother, and they were really scared. So by us being so restrictive about how the data could be shared, we really started to build trust with our employees. We were completely transparent. They saw everything. It was their solution. The second thing is the fact that we gave them control on the insights. They were the ones that chose if they wanted to share it. The executives, the management, nobody else. They were the ones that chose. This showed that we really respected them. We respected that they would do the right thing. They would share the data if it was the right thing to do. And if not, they wouldn't. So that was a really important thing for us. The other thing was the dialogue that it generated. By creating this kind of crowdsourced idea and by having the dialogue, people really opened up and they shared their concerns. They shared. The thing that's interesting with this for me was one of the most exciting pieces of this work, was all of a sudden it completely changed. The employees were telling us we should be doing more analytics. I have a list of 53 new requirements that has come from employees. They want us to do more analysis. They want us to take in more data because they're starting to see some value for themselves. And finally, relationships. The challenge that we ran into is that the management want to know who the experts are, or they want to know who's got high eminence, or some of the measurements that we do. But employees might not want to share that information. So it was kind of this bit of a tug of war. So it really, I have to give credit to the IBM execs for this, but they really did trust us that this was the right thing to do, even though it limited the amount of data that they had. But it also enabled us to do an interesting thing, and I want to share a quick story. So about a few months ago, a program inside IBM that was running an employee advocacy program. So they wanted to identify employees that had good social eminence in order to see whether they become advocates for IBM outside of the company. And they came to me and said, Marie, we see you have all this data. You measure employee eminence and reputation. Can we have the data? And I said, well, you can have aggregated analysis, but I can't give you the names of people. I can't tell you these are the top 50 people that you can go reach out to. So obviously they weren't impressed. So we had a good conversation, and it actually ended up that by having a private system, we could do something a lot better than they had initially wanted. Because instead of spying on the employees, they could be completely transparent. They could be transparent as well. So they would issue to us to say, these are what we're looking for. These are the characteristics we're looking for. Our system could match the needs of our users with the needs of their system. But before we shared any names, we could go back to the employees and let them know there's this advocacy program. They would like to potentially recruit you. Would you be interested in being introduced? So we kind of became like the dating agency for technology people. But it respected their privacy, but yet it gave the advocacy people the information. And what was better, it kind of created a relationship. Instead of the advocacy people cold calling somebody, this person had said, I'm happy for you to talk to me. And that was a really, really nice way. So it completely changed the relationships. So that's been another side effect of having a really constricted privacy model, a really kind of employee-centric privacy model. So now, and I don't know what my time is like, 10 minutes, okay. So for the rest of it, I just wanted to give you 3 concrete examples of the type of analysis we did and the value that it added to the individual into IBM and the privacy challenges associated with it. One thing I would say is, I don't know any of you who have a lot of collaboration and social data in your companies, but for me, I always say it's the most under-leveraged source of data in the business. It is so valuable, and companies rarely ever appreciate it. They appreciate financial system data or sales system data, but they completely forget about the collaboration data. So there's a gazillion questions that you can answer by analyzing social and collaboration data. I'm only going to talk about 3. Oh, the slide's a little bit gone funny, but so the first solution, so we went to the IBMers and we asked them, what is the first set of analysis that we could give you that would be valuable? Because again, it was all about their value. So they were really interested in digital reputation, because everybody wants to improve their career, they want to get promotions, they want to learn more, they want to be connected with experts. So they wanted kind of reputation analysis. The corporation was interested in engagement, because obviously employee engagement is really important nowadays. Engagement and reputation, at least in the context of a social system, are 2 sides of the same coin, because we measure reputation by looking at how individuals interact, And engagement is the measure of how people interact with each other. If people are not engaged, they're not interacting. So we were able to give both the business and the employee value. What we gave the employee was a dashboard, very simple. Again, we needed them to have, remember, simplicity and ease of use was one of our key mantras. So this was a very simple system. It measured 4 key performance indicators, KPIs, scores. The first one was activity. Activity is a measure of what somebody does. So the more you do, the higher your score goes for activity. So activity might be you created a piece of content, you shared a link to a web page, you commented on somebody's content, you created a blog post, you know, whatever. So activity. The next thing is reaction. Reaction is not about what you do, it's about how others respond to what you do. So it's called the reaction. And what reaction is, for example, if I create a piece of content and lots of people download it, or they comment on it, or they tag it, or they bookmark it, or they share it, they're reacting. There's something of value in that, otherwise they wouldn't react. So reaction is kind of a measure of the value of what you're doing. Eminence is kind of the next stage. In a network, when you start doing stuff, and people start valuing what you're doing, you start to get associated with that content. So Marie knows about analytics. So you get some eminence, you get some reputation. So eminence is for things like, do people follow you? Do they ask you questions? Do they tag you? Do they comment a lot on your content, on your status updates? So it's how they're interacting with you, the individual. And then finally, network. Network is a really important measure. It's a measure of the quality and efficacy of your network. So we had this conversation last night about weak links and strong links, and that the most valuable links that we have in our lives are actually the weak links. The strong links are sharing information we already know, because it's the links with the people we connect to regularly. The weak links brings us in new information that we don't normally get. So weak links are really important. When you're looking at your network, you want to measure how effective is my network. You can't have a network of 5,000 people and it's all active at the same time. We don't have enough hours in the day. But there's parts of your network that you want to keep activated. So for example, if you're looking to move into a new job in analytics, you might want to look at the breakdown of my network. Do I have analytics people in my network? Are they active? Have I a relationship with them? If not, I might want to increase my activity so that when I do want to move into a new role, I have the network of people that can help me get there. So it's about trying to understand your network. So that was the first application we built. The second thing that happened was the business then said, okay, you've done this for the employees. You've measured their reputation. You've given us engagement, so we now know how engaged our employees are. But is there any other value that this gives us? Because IBM is, as you know, we're probably one of the highest patent generators on the planet, so we have lots and lots of innovation. And I'm in the R&D organization, so innovation is our life's blood. We decided we would look at the simple question, is there a correlation between somebody's engagement, their digital reputation, these engagement scores, so their network, and their likelihood to innovate? So we basically analyzed huge volumes of innovation data from within IBM and also customer advocacy data, and we correlated it to our engagement analysis that we had done on the social network. And we found that there was actually a very high correlation. In fact, engagement was I think it was the #1 predictor of both innovation and advocacy. You were 120% more likely to innovate if you had an optimal social profile and a collaboration profile, and you were 150% more likely to have been a customer advocate. There's different behaviors for different people in different roles, so it's not the same for everybody, but what was absolutely clear is people that are effective at using their network, at sharing information, at getting new information, they innovate more than people who aren't. Now, the other interesting thing here was that because we had this dashboard that could measure this for every individual in IBM, every IBMer could start to measure themselves and could optimize themselves to maximize their chance of innovation. And if you're in an innovation organization, that's really important. So this became a really another interesting benefit. And now I'm probably over it, but just the very last one, this is a real business level example, but it has a really nice benefit for the employee as well. So everything was about benefit to the employee. companies, if we believe, and the jury's out yet, but if we believe that companies are moving away from command and control, rigid structures, and moving more to like a networked organization, the future of work, if you don't have rigid hierarchies, how do you know who to go to? How do you know who are the people who know things? How do you know how to get stuff done? You don't know if you don't analyze the network. So what we did is, this is one example of an organization. Each color is a different team, different group, and it shows how they're interacting with each other. So now all of a sudden, the business can start to look and see, does it have any dysfunction that it needs to be aware of? So for example, over here, I don't know if there's a spotter, but over here we've got an isolated team. Is that an issue? Now it turns out in this network it's actually not an issue, because these are security people, they do all the security of the building, and they don't need to be connected with anybody else. So they're just connected to the business ops person. However, here, there's another isolated team. Now this is an issue. This is a team that really should be connected here and they're not. So this is something you can do about this. You can help them get integrated into the bigger team. And there's lots. The other thing here is information brokers. This organization is an example. Densely connected to each other, not well connected with other teams, except for through 3 different information brokers. These are people who, if they left the company in the morning, the information flow to that team would dry up and die. That team would suffocate. So an organization needs to understand the roles that people are playing in the network. And we as individuals need to understand our roles. What role are we playing? Are we a broker? Because if, for example, we're a broker, this is another interesting thing, and I will stop there, I know if we're a broker and we don't engage, we become a blocker. We prevent the flow of information downstream. So it's really important that we understand our roles within the network. So these are just hopefully some examples of how analytics can help every single individual in the enterprise. And once you explain that to them, once they understand it, and once you have the right privacy model, they will want you to analyze their data, I can guarantee you, because this is what we found within IBM. So just finally, one sentence, could this work in the external social sphere, this idea of privacy? I think it could. I think it's going to be a challenge. I think we all as a society are going to have to push for transparency. But I know personally, I'd like to know what information my favorite retailer is using every time they put an ad on my page or they post me an email. I'd like to know what is the information they're actually using and what facts do they have about me. So finally, and this is a call out to anybody doing analytics, if we start to respect the employees, respect the people, if we start to think about privacy positively, not negatively, as an opportunity to innovate, I do think we can have this virtuous circle where people want to share their data because they trust that we're going to be transparent with them with what we're doing with it. Thank you very much.